Okay. Well. Okay. Well, hello everyone. My name is Icardo Isasa, and well, thank you for being here in my first ever conference presentation. I'm presenting the ser and estar variation, the copular variation in the Spanish of the Basque Country. So to start with, I'd like to show you some preliminary facts to keep in mind during my presentation about the linguistic variables, etc., etc. Okay. So first of all, Spanish, unlike languages like English or French, has two copular verbs, ser and estar. These two copular verbs have been in constant competition since in the 12th century they were semantically distinct, like differentiated. And since then, estar has been taken over slowly and slowly of the context that were originally reserved for the default copula, let's say, ser, okay? However, well, there have been many attempts to distinguish these copulas, like binary attempts, like inherent, temporary, etc., especially in the areas of second language pedagogy. But these have usually failed because the complexity of the issue goes beyond that. There are many factors such as the existence of a subjacent process, directionality, interpretations, pragmatics, that have an effect in the choice of copula. Also, 80% of Spanish adjectives allow both copulas, depending on these factors as well, which makes it a little bit more complex. So then, there have been many studies in this topic, in the copula choice in Spanish, in both monolingual varieties. There have been studies in Venezuela, Mexico, and Puerto Rico. Monolingual to a certain extent, of course. And in bilingual communities, especially in the USA, LA, Houston, New Mexico. And these studies have generally shown a tendency to convergence to estar. That is, a simplification from the use of both copulars to the bigger use of estar. So before I go on with the causes and tendencies of this convergence, I want to show you some facts about the Basque Country, geographical and linguistic facts, so that you know more about it. Okay, so the Basque Country is located, as we Basque people know it, between Spanish and France. There's 7 provinces. As you can see here, okay, these 4 provinces belong to Spain. These 3 provinces are the Basque Autonomous Community, and is the reign of Nafarroa. And then these 3 provinces belong to France, Lapurdi, Nafarroa, Beria, and Zuberoa. For my study, most of the speakers were from this area, and I had some speakers from the north of Nafarroa as well. Okay, so what is Basque? Have you guys ever heard of Basque? Well, if you haven't, Basque is one of the oldest languages in Europe, if not the oldest, and it's an isolated language. There are no related languages that we know of right now to Basque. There have been many theories, but they haven't been proven. And it's typologically very different from Spanish. However, very important, Basque does have a copular distinction. In this case, ser is izan in Basque, and estar is egon. Okay, then Basque has it has hundreds of thousands of speakers. However, UNESCO classifies Basque as a vulnerable language. If we look at the statistics of usage of Basque, for example, in the Basque Autonomous Community, only 13% uses Basque at home, and 7% uses both, so it will be a rough 20%. But 77% of households use Spanish. In the province of Nafarroa, there's 6% usage of Basque, and it's concentrated mainly in this area. In these towns, the use of Basque can be really, really high, like up to 80%. Okay, this area, however, well, there's barely no Basque content here. As for the political situation, language political situation, in this area, it is considered a co-official language with Spanish. In Nafarroa, it's considered co-officially north of the capital, like this is the capital here. North of it, it's co-official. South of it, it's not. And in France, it's not considered co-official, or it doesn't have a recognition as French does. There are barely no monolingual speakers of Basque. If there are, they were born before the 1930s, which means that nowadays almost all speakers of Basque know Spanish. Okay? So, well, going back to the causes and tendencies of the conversion of estar that I mentioned before. Okay. Oh no, what happened here? Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, it should be here. Okay. So let's see. The main tendency in the extension, that has been found in these studies, is that the acceleration of the extension happens mainly in bilingual communities. This may be due to two main factors: the contact with languages without copy distinction, like English, and also the lack of access to a formal standard. That is, the less educated you are in a formal standard of Spanish, the more prone you are to use estar. As for the linguistic variables that favor estar, the most important ones have been the adjective type. And here we have adjective types: size, physical appearance, physical state, mental state, status, description, evaluation. Ortiz and Gutierrez, some authors, they mentioned that this type of adjectives refer to subjectively evaluated characteristics that would favor estar, whereas those who are more objective, they would go more with ser. Also, another factor is animacy. Animate reference may favor bigger use of estar. And Kim Gisler and Pedro Guijarro Fuentes also mentioned stage-level predicates, individual reference, immediate experience with the referent, and characteristics susceptible to change. And actually, it's this study here by Gisler and Guijarro Fuentes that I'm basing my study on. Jesus. I don't know what's going on here. It's okay. Good. Okay, good. So, I based my study in their study from 2008, Variation in Contemporary Spanish, Linguistic Predictors of Estar in 4 cases of language contact. These 4 cases are the 4 main cases of language contact in Spain. Let's say, in Galicia, Basque Country, Catalonia, and Valencia. And it was found that in Galicia and the Basque Country, there was an extension of estar compared to a monolingual control group. But on the other 2, there wasn't. However, the reason why I'm doing this re-study is because I had 2 concerns concerning this study. There was a very unbalanced distribution of participants per case. Catalonian participants, there were 141, whereas there were only 17 in the Basque Country. And also, there was no differentiation of the bilingualism level of these participants. So this is what I'm addressing in my re-study. Okay, so then, the methodology that I used in my study, first off, the participants, there were 65 participants, 55 women, 10 men, ages 15 to 54. They were born and raised in the Basque Country, especially in Irún, Guipúzcoa, which is where I'm from, and the provinces of Guipúzcoa and Vizcaya. Their parents were either Basque or in Spanish, and this was done. Okay, so the participants who were not born and raised in the Basque Country were discarded, as well as the participants whose parents, at least one of them, was born outside of Spain. I did that in order to avoid contact with other dialects, because it has been shown that some dialects tend more to start with, whereas others don't. As for social class and education, they were pretty much middle class, and they were high school or college educated. Most of them were college educated. So then, I distributed a survey in SurveyMonkey. This was distributed by a Facebook event that I did, and invited all my friends. Then I emailed my parents, and they emailed it to their coworkers and stuff. They first had to complete a background questionnaire on questions about their sex, age, linguistic background, consumer tendencies, education, occupation, etc., etc. And then they had to complete a contextualized preference task. They had 28 items adapted from Gisela and Guijarro Fuentes' study, and each item presented a context in which participants had to choose either ser or estar. So, for example, here, we've got, Paula and Raul are planning to go to dinner. Paula is screaming from the room while she's getting ready to go out with Raul. When she gets when she goes to the living room, she asks, "Do you want to go in my car?" And Raul says, "Oh, you are so pretty. I mean, qué bonita estás eres." They had to choose either ser or estar. Okay? And this was, the context followed a story, 28 contexts, and that took about 30 minutes. Then, The linguistic variables that I used, I used the same ones as used in Guijarro Fuentes. The first one would be the type of predicate, which has been found highly significant in many studies in the topic. We had two types: individual level and stage level. Stage level predicates have a limit in time, whereas individual level predicates do not, so they apply to the entire referent. The frame of reference, we have the relationship of the referent with like things or to itself in another point of time. Class reference refers to the relationship of a referent with like persons or like items, whereas the individual frame of reference refers to the person's state in one moment compared to another point in time of his life. The experience with the referent refers to how aware we are of what characteristic of a referent. For example, here, cold, it refers to a soup. We are not aware that that soup is cold until we take it, and oh, it's surprising. It's immediate referent, okay? It denotes some surprise. Whereas ongoing contact with the referent, it's something that we already know from before. Here, sad refers to a sad person, and we already know that person's sad, so it's been ongoing. Susceptibility to change, that means if a characteristic can change or not. We've got like a big here refers to the size of an apartment. That cannot change, like it cannot change just by like that, like being fat or being thin. The animacy refers to, well, if it's animate or inanimate. I added body part, which Gisela and Guijarro Fuentes did not have, because in some languages like Quechua, for example, the inalienability of a thing, like something that belongs to you but it's not animate, works in a different way and might have an effect. And also the copulas allowed were either like the regular uses of the copulas, if they were usually used with estar, with ser, or with both. The final linguistic variable is the type of adjective. I had 10 types: age, color, description, evaluation, mental state, personality, physical appearance, sensory characteristics, size, and status. There were 21 adjectives in total. 3 of them were repeated. Bonito, pretty, blue, azul blue, and grande, big were repeated twice or 3 times. And, well, as for the social factor, well, before going to that, this is how it looked like in the analysis. So each adjective here had, oh, no, okay, sorry. This adjective here had, well, depending on the other linguistic variables, had one variant or the other. Okay? And this was how, and then this was analyzed with the participant group, etc., that I'm going to talk about now. The social factor that I took into account was the linguistic background of the participant. They were divided in 3 groups depending on their linguistic self-evaluation. If they were balanced bilinguals in Spanish and Basque, they went to the PEQ group. They were Spanish dominant PES group, and if they were Basque dominant, they were a PV group. The analysis that I conducted on the data was a logistic regression. Well, it was conducted by Dr. Roy, which I thank really very much. And we conducted analysis in each group to see the effect of the linguistic background and the linguistic variables in the choice of copula. So, the research questions were: which linguistic variables predict the use of estar? Does animacy have an effect on estar? Which adjective types favor the use of estar? And does a higher bilingualism in Basque imply a greater use of estar? That is, the more you speak Basque, do you use more estar? So the hypotheses for these questions were: stage-level predicates, an individual frame of reference, animate reference, immediate experience with the referent, and adjectives susceptible to change will favor estar. The type of adjectives that will favor estar will be adjective of physical appearance, age, size, physical state, mental state, status, and evaluation, and the PEQ and PV groups will favor estar more than the PES group. So, going to the results. For the first research question, the most important, most significant variable for all 3 groups was the susceptibility to change. It was highly significant for all of them when the result was, when the change was, when it was susceptible, not when it was not. And second one was stage-level predicate and also individual frame of reference. These variables, predicate type and frame of reference, had a one-to-one relationship. So stage-level predicates went with an individual frame of reference, whereas an individual-level predicate went with a class frame of reference. These were highly significant for all 3 groups as well. Also, the copula allowed estar was significant for these 2 groups as well, PEQ and PES. Then also, experience was not significant, even though ongoing experience did have disfavored estar, even if it wasn't significant, and the copula allowed ser strongly disfavored the use of estar as well. Then For the research question number 2, the adjective types, you can see here this list here. It goes from the biggest use of estar to the least. As predicted, physical state, mental state, physical appearance, these 3 favored estar. But these 4 that was supposed to favor estar did not. Okay? So then, going with this. As for the significance of these types, we've got physical state, which has highly significant for the PEQ and the PES group. These all in these adjective types, all the factors that would favor estar were the same. They were stage level predicates, individual frame of reference, immediate experience, susceptible to change, especially susceptible to change, which was the most significant one. Physical appearance as well. Although here, there were 3 of them. One was animate, the other one was a body part, and the third one, delgado, it didn't match. Like the variables that would go with estar didn't match. Like they would go with ser, but they were susceptible to change, which showed that it was the most significant one for this. Also, color adjectives, which was pretty surprising because even though they favored the variants favored estar, they would only go with ser. The capital allowed with ser, and it showed a really special. Yeah, I will talk about that now. And then sensory characteristics were significant for the PEQ group, and mental state were significant for the PES group. You can see here too that in these ones, they were favoring estar, although not significantly for the PES group, whereas they weren't for these 2 groups. Then, as I said before, physical state adjectives, all variables agreed with estar. When I say this, I mean the variants that I mentioned. Some would go with estar, others would go with ser, and in this one, all of them would go with estar, same as here that I mentioned before. The color adjectives, only one of them favored estar in percentages, and and as I mentioned before, there were variants that favored estar, but it showed different, even if it was significant, it showed a really weird results, let's say. So, I should study that in more depth. And then these 2 adjectives here, they were susceptible to, even though the variants did not match either, they were susceptible to change. So that was, let's say, the most important variable that had an effect in these 2. As for the research question number 3, the proportion, even though it was predicted that being bilingual would mean a higher use of estar, that was not the case. The use was barely the same for all 3 groups, if you can see it in the proportions. And you can see there's barely any difference here. Okay, and so finally, my conclusions that I can draw from these results are that the predictors of estar selection were stage predicate type, individual frame of reference, susceptibility to change, especially that one, and copulus allowed. They were the best predictors for the choice of estar. As for the types of attitudes, physical state, mental state, and physical appearance were the ones which were significant and were predictors of estar. But there's more research needed with the adjectives that I mentioned before that were hypothesized to go with estar but didn't. And there were no major differences between the 3 groups, suggesting that the contact does not trigger the extension of estar. But this may be due, as I said before, because we do have a capital distinction in Basque, and that the level of education of the participants was pretty high. Definitely there are there's a bigger need of participants for both PES and exactly PV group, because the PV group, I only had 11 participants, and I had, for example, in PEQ I had 30. But that's something that I would like to address in further research. And that's all from me. I would have some suggestions and questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anne. We have 10 minutes for questions.
So I had sort of a comment about a possible explanation for why other studies have found effect on bilingualism. So there's a lot of work on coordinatization, where generally if you get a bunch of different dialects of one language together, you get a sort of dialect leveling. And so a lot of the bilingual like a bilingual community in like Los Angeles,
Mm-hmm.
often bilingual will correspond with people from a variety of different
Yeah.
backgrounds,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's possible because you said that the distinction between ser and estar is different in different dialects, right?
No, the distinction, what I mentioned is that the use of estar in some dialects is higher. It's more, there are more innovative uses in some dialects, and some dialects are more conservative in their use of estar. They keep the distinction, like they use ser more, like in the innovative dialects, estar is taking over the original context of ser. Whereas in some of them, it's not as advanced. Like that convergence, that tendency to simplification is not happening yet. That's what I meant.
Yeah, so I guess my suggestion is if you have more variation in terms of the speakers in a particular community,
Yes.
for example, in Los Angeles,
Uh-huh.
it's possible that what you could be getting is dialect level, and
It could happen, yeah.
whereas that wouldn't happen in a bilingual case like the Basque Country,
Mhm.
where you don't have this dialect contact. So do you think that something like that might be what's going on, or
It could
think something
be,
else?
yeah. It could be interesting, for example, like for further research, studying the immigrants in the area. Because, okay, most of my participants were from my city, and my city is a big migrant city. Like we have, there was a big like migration in the 50s, and also now it's happening. A lot of people are coming from Latin America, so it would be interesting, definitely, to study the like how being in contact with like other dialects would be. But in my case, I wanted to study the like intradialectally. So, but yeah, that would be a great way like to study for further research.
Thank you very much. This is very interesting because oftentimes in linguistics we have these two competing probably dialects or levels of use, and one appears and one take the dominance of the other one, and the other one disappears for no reasons. And probably that's the case with my first language, Arabic, where we have the copula disappeared altogether from Arabic and the present simple tense, and it's still available in the past tense. So there's no explanation for that except for this probably competing phenomena. So do you expect that one of these will take over and the other one will disappear?
I mean, that's a big prediction, but maybe, I mean, it could happen. Depends on like the situation of contact. As for example, the study of Silva Corbalan that I mentioned in LA. For example, lower classes, they're taking over. I don't know. It's like depends of how the stigmatized it is. I am not really sure if it's really stigmatized, the bigger use of estar or not. But if it becomes the trend, if it's not stigmatized, it could happen like with a lot of time. I'm not sure. I'm not gonna make such a big prediction because, well, I'm very amateur in this stuff. But yeah, it maybe, I don't know. It depends also which, I think the type, like the linguistic variables, depends which type of adjective. It's not like in general it would disappear, but some cases in context with different type of adjective or susceptibility to change, which was really highly significant, maybe this would trigger like a bigger use of estar, which like could advance a bigger use of estar in that case, in those cases, rather than generally just Spanish language pushing ser out of the way.
I saw that you had like a relatively unbalanced sample between males and females.
Uh-huh.
Is it possible that you might have a difference there, like gender difference in the production of?
See, that I wanted to
estar?
study that at first when I did this for a class project, and I wanted to like study the difference of the males and females. Unfortunately, when I sent this to on Facebook, all my girlfriends did it, but the guys did not. And I sent it to my dad, and he sent it to all his coworkers, which are all men. And actually, the 10 guys that are there are like my dad's coworkers and my dad, while the rest are my mom and her coworkers, she works in a school, so most of the teachers are female, and the people in my undergrad, which was predominantly female. Definitely it's something that I want to look into, the difference of these sexes, because in this area, for example, if you want to look at social class, it's not as easy to do because most of them were middle class, and there were no big differences, but sex could like have an effect. So yeah, I wanna look into that like in the future. More men, definitely more men. So yeah.
All right. So we'll take a break now, and we'll reconvene at 3:30. Okay. Thank you.